Hello, hello, hello. My name is Robert. I am the recovery guy, and you have entered into The Fix.
With Will here, it's a safety net for you all. So, like Will said, my sobriety date. Well, he didn't say my sobriety date. It's April 25th, 1986, and Mike and I were talking before the meeting, and long-term sobriety is not about not drinking. I think a lot of times the third tradition sells the program of Alcoholics Anonymous short because the only requirement for membership is a desire to stop drinking. But let's not confuse the desire to stop drinking with sobriety, and let's not confuse sobriety with recovery, because they're very, very different. In order for me to have the 39 years I have, it's come with countless trips to recovery centers, sharing the message, great sponsorship. First, Jack was my sponsor for 32 years. Will's been my sponsor since 2019. Will's been my friend for 40 years. And I originally came into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous back on February 9th of 1986. But there's a paragraph on page 30. It says, we have to concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in recovery. And I admitted to you that I was an alcoholic, but only because I wanted you to like me. I wasn't ready to concede because I wasn't ready to like me. And the only defense I had was to find a way to admit to you without admitting to me. And that lasted me 71 days. It was a brilliant plan for 71 days. I tell people all the time, it works right up until you get drunk. And so if you're new or relatively new to the program of Alcoholics Anonymous, and you want to be like Mike, you want to be like Will, you want to be like me, any other old timer in this room, you will do the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. You will make the big book your guide, and you'll latch onto a sponsor who has proven themselves, him or herself, along the way. Because if you want what we have, and you are willing to go along to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. And the road to recovery is a continuing road. I still do steps 10, 11, and 12 on a regular basis. I still go to meetings. I still pray every day. I still do all the things that I did, what you told me to do when I first came in 1986. I just do them on a different level. I still, like Carol, I still serve. I remember Carol, I was here in, I guess it was October, maybe November, probably October, the way my mind works. And I remember you were chairing a meeting, and that's how I remember you. And so we serve if we want to be served. We love, and I really appreciate, Don, tonight you reading that prayer, because it gives us back our center. It reminds us of who we are in God's realm. It is better to understand than it is to be understood. It's better to be loved than it is to be loved. It's better to love than it is to be loved. It is better to do everything for someone else. I tell people all the time, if you're not willing to be third, you'll never be first. And that's a biblical principle. If you don't like the Bible, suck it up, buttercup, because I've got this time. And so, but there are principles that are set down that are guides for us, and that is just one of them. If you're not ready to be third, remember it. If you're not ready to be third, you'll never be first. And like any other ego-driven person, which we all are, that's why we're here, because we don't want to die from a seemingly helpless state of mind and body. And so we want to live, and that takes an ego. But my ego needs to be set aside long enough to help the other person. Does that make sense to you? And here's the only joke I know. Okay, So ready for the fun part of this evening's talk. So there's a Baptist, there's a Catholic, and there's a Christian Scientist, and they're all in hell. And the Baptist says, if I just listened to my preacher, I wouldn't be here. And the Catholic says, if I just listened to my priest, I wouldn't be here. And the Christian Scientist sat over in the corner and said, I'm not here. I'm not here. And that's so much the way that we are. We're in such a state of denial. Everyone could see me before I was willing to admit. Because like most of us, people pretty much knew that I had a problem with alcohol. And one of the guys at the turning point where Will moved in Las Vegas. I got sober in Las Vegas, by the way. It's where I met Will. And so if you say you can't get sober here, trust me, getting sober in Las Vegas. I was telling people before the meeting, getting sober in Las Vegas is like trying to learn how to swim in a shark tank. Because the attractiveness and the allure of the casinos where they offer everything, scantily clad women, buffet, so you can become a compulsive overeater, you can gamble your paychecks, and you can get drunk all at the same time. Which was, I did that. So I know you could do that all at the same time. You could take your drink to the buffet, and when and if you gamble enough, you get a free buffet, and if you promise to come back and gamble. And it was just amazing. So getting sober in Las Vegas was difficult, but I think wherever an individual decides to stop drinking, that's the most difficult place, because long before we arrive, we show up. And no matter where we're at, no matter what we're doing, we always have us to contend with. And we, it says in the foreword to the first edition, we have a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And no matter where we go, no matter where we are, no matter who we're with, we always are seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. So it sort of transfers no matter where we're at. And Will tell you, because Will got sober in Pomona, California, and he wasn't really ready to absorb the program or do what other people told him to do to live happy, joyous, and free until he moved to Las Vegas. And then when he got here to Las Vegas, he realized there was another way to live. And Will, at the time, he was living as a sober person, but he didn't have a gift of sobriety. That he would learn later on. So we know, just because you're in this room tonight doesn't mean you're happy, joyous, and free. And we're sure that God, we were talking to Chad on the way up, we are sure that God wants us to be, we are sure. We're not a glum lot. And it says on page 132 in the Big Book, and I will refer to this a lot, we've been speaking to you sometimes of serious, sometimes tragic things. We've been dealing with alcohol in its worth aspect, but we aren't a glum lot. If newcomers could see no joy or fun in our existence, they wouldn't want it. So if you find a person who's been around for a while and they don't exhibit joy or fun in their existence, run away. Because all they can teach you is how to be stupid, boring, and glum. They don't insist on enjoying life. And if you disagree with me, see me after the meeting, and I'll show you in the Big Book where you're wrong. Because the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is not designed to save our life. Doctors are. You know, even in the doctor's opinion, Dr. Silkworth talks about doctors who have incredible ability and they have a sincerity to help us. But if we don't get a power, a non-human power, we're doomed. And the program of Alcoholics Anonymous is a guide to teach us how to have a power greater than ourselves, how to have a relationship with the loving God as he could express himself in our group conscience. And as a result of that relationship, we won't want to drink anymore. And because you could teach through aversion therapy someone how not to drink. You just make their threshold of pain greater than taking a drink would be. And we come across that as we're coerced into recovery. Because every one of us got here, we were talking about it earlier today at a meeting, every one of us got here through some form of coercion. The judge said, if you don't do this program, I'm going to lock you up. The significant other said, if you show up drunk again, I'm going to change the locks. The mom and dad said, if you steal from me one more time, we're done. The brother or sister said, if you show up drunk one more time. The employer said, if you don't show up on Monday instead of Wednesday, I'm going to fire you. So we all get here. And I did all those things. Thank you very much. We all get here different ways, but we end up the same. That's why we can walk into a room of Alcoholics Anonymous and I can feel relatable to each and every one of you because I belong here. And no matter how you got here, you find a reason to stay. And my reason to stay is not because I'm not drinking, but because I've discovered a new way to live. A life that is, you know what? My current wife, she's my current wife until I die. She's told me that more than once. And we've been married over 36 years. She's my third wife. My first two wives, I drank. Those marriages were doomed before they even started because I was a hopeless alcoholic, just as Bill. And then, you know, I'll have 11 grandchildren by this summer. 11 grandchildren. Mike, you just had your 7th? Something like that. Obviously, Mike's kind of proud of that. Although he didn't have anything to do with it. He just cheered them all along the way. But if you live long enough, and I tell you this because I want you to be sober long enough to experience some of the things that we experience along the journey of recovery. I've been married over 36 years, been with the same girl 37 years. There's nothing like waking up in a bed that is familiar to you. And you know what? It's been a long time since I walked out to my driveway to see if my car was still there. And when police officers pull behind me, I don't care if they pull me over. Because I can show my registration, I can show my insurance, I can show them this thing called the driver's license, and that always wasn't true. And all these things happen to us along the way that is so much more than just not drinking. The plan of recovery is a plan. You have to work the plan for the plan to work for you, though. Because when we come in here very maladjusted. And some of us have different backgrounds with each other, but our backgrounds did the same thing to us. So whether you came from a broken home or an intact home, whether you were the middle child of 7 kids, whether you were an only child, whether you had a high socioeconomic level, or whether you were low in the totem pole economically, we all feel the same way. No matter how love or how regard was given to us, we felt like we didn't belong. We felt like we didn't fit. And that caused us such a great amount of pain that we had to drink just so we could cope. And that's been universally true in my sober life, in men and women I've met along the way. For some reason, we just don't feel a part of. And that causes, once again, great pain and concern on our part. And by the time we're 14, 15, or 16 years old, which is universally true, we have to find a relief for that. And that relief is oftentimes, most often for most of us, alcohol. We pick up other things along the way as we go, like many of us do. Certainly how I did. And because we thought we could find an easier, softer way. We didn't realize there wasn't an easier, softer way. Friends of Will told me early on, the steps are the easier, softer way. If you want an easier, softer way, then work the 12 Steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. Read your big book. Work with your sponsor. Find a God that you can relate to that makes sense to you. And this thing on God, I will be the first to tell you, or the second or the third, it's not who your God is, it's what your God does. So if you're struggling with the concept of a higher power, once again, because we're all religious backgrounds, many of its occupations are represented. We all come from different places. We all have a different interpretation of who God is, but what God does. You know, for my first 7 years, my higher power was the group, because I really wasn't sure who my higher power was. Now it's pretty obvious to me personally, but you'll never know who that higher power is in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, because it doesn't matter. Your higher power has to be your higher power. Now, where I have a bone of contention with people, if you're not happy, joyous, and free, just keep quiet. Don't tell anyone how long you've been sober. I'm really serious about that. Because if newcomers, because our obligation is to the newcomer. It's not to Mike or to Will or to anyone else who's been around for a while, because you believe what you're going to believe. It's that newcomer who walks into the room who's wondering if he or she is going to fit. That's our obligation. Because thank God there was people who felt as I feel now existed when I first walked into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous back in 1986. Because by then we burned all the bridges. I was unemployable. No one in my family wanted me. Friends had abandoned me, or I'd abandoned them. They just made it official. Some made it more official than others. But I was alone. Remember that feeling of being alone? Remember that feeling of thinking, if this doesn't work, I'm screwed, because I have no place else to go. And I don't know about you. Actually, I do. It was the last house on the block. There was no place else to go. I burned every other avenue down to the ground more than once. And if AA didn't work, I was in trouble. And you know, and I know this, my relapse. I relapsed after 71 days. And it wasn't, it says no matter how far down the scale we have gone, it didn't surprise me that I got worse over any considerable period. Things get worse, never better. It surprised me on how fast it occurred. I relapsed on April 19th of 1986. By April 24th, I was holed up in a hotel room. It was a swanky hotel room, I want you to know. You could pay by the hour. You could pay by half a day. And you could pay by the week. That's the kind of place this was. And my dad had paid for a week. But I remember being up there, and it didn't surprise me that I was drunk. It surprised me how desperate I got in such a short period of time. And many of us here, you ever hear voices? Some are real and some are imagined. Yes. Mostly imagined. But family members, you ever hear them? They're looking at you. My dad was Robert, so I was always called Bobby. Thank you, Will. And it was always Bobby, Bobby, Bobby. What are you doing? Remember those voices? And everyone would look at us in amazement and say, why are you doing this? They didn't understand why, and they didn't understand why I was doing it, but I had to do it. It was my way of surviving that was killing me, right? That's when we know we're in trouble. When the means of our only survival is killing us, what do? And I remember the day I went into treatment, all the voices had gone. And I was faced in the mirror, and I was 32 years old, and I was going to die. And there was nothing I could do. Remember that feeling of desperation, of despair, thinking, I'm out of control. We don't know we're alcoholic at this point. I wasn't ready to admit, although I did look up in the yellow pages under alcoholism, and I went into treatment that morning. But I remember in that hotel room, the day before I would come back to Alcoholics Anonymous, and all the voices were gone, but they were replaced with the voices of AA. Keep coming back. We'll love you till you can learn how to love yourself. Keep it simple, sweetheart. All the things that you taught me along the way, they were now the voices in my head. And I knew that I didn't want to die because I got a taste of living in 71 days. And I realized that maybe I am. We were talking about it earlier. Maybe without my permission, maybe I really am an alcoholic of sorts. Right? And I went back to the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. That was April 25th, 1986. And I have not drank or used or anything that would interrupt my sobriety ever since that. And I will be sober 40 years. Can you imagine? 40 freaking years of not only not drinking, but learning how to live a sober life, learning how to be that father, that husband, that friend, that employee. I'm retired now, but I could go anywhere and do anything. I could work for anyone if I chose to work. I just don't choose to work for obvious reasons. And yet, AA has taught me everything. So once again, to you who are new or relatively new, just stick around. If you don't have a sponsor, get a sponsor, because sponsorship is invaluable. I'll tell you a story about Will and me. I've known Will for 40 years, ever since I've come into the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And when my sponsor of 32 years passed away, he passed away of cancer in January of 2019. And I visited him in the hospital in Las Vegas, and I was living in Salt Lake City. And I went down, and I knew it was the last time I was going to see Jack alive. And Jack was a giant in Las Vegas recovery. He was manager of a Lano club like this. He was chairman of Intergroup. I mean, he was really big in Las Vegas. And I was going to miss him a lot by what he taught me and how he carried himself. And I went down to my vehicle, and I cried for a bit, and I called up Will and I said, Jack's dying, and I'm never going to see him alive again. Would you be my sponsor? And I was 32 years sober. That's how much I believe in sobriety. That's how much I believe in sponsorship. So it never gets old, because the program never gets old. We were talking about reading the big book over and over again. I read the big book like a newcomer, because part of me, it says we don't regret the past, nor do we wish to shut the door on it. I will never forget what it's like walking into the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous for the very first time, thinking, you better like me. Because if you don't like me, I'm in a lot of trouble. Because I had nowhere to go. Will is absolutely being very honest. When I didn't have a place to live. But one day at a time, we can learn how to be happy, joyous, and free. I can't drive this point home enough. If you don't get a sponsor, have a sponsor. If you leave this meeting, male or female, tonight, and you don't have a sponsor, that's on you. Mm-hmm. You really don't want what we have. You're just buying time between drinks. Because good sponsorship will do for you when we're not doing for ourselves, right? So when I started drinking, it was a relief to me. You know, I drank the first time like many for the same reason that you do, because we can get away with something. The second time I drank, though, that was the magic. Because I drank the second time because of how it made me feel the first time. Remember that feeling of being nothing? And then that feeling of being an almost? When you come from nothing and you are nothing, and you're always going to be a nothing, in our minds we are nothing, being an almost is everything. Being an almost is like winning the big game. Even though I never knew I was going to be something, being an almost beats being a nothing every single time. And my alcoholism was so rapid that even though I was a periodic drinker, F. Scott Fitzgerald says, first the man takes a drink, then the drink takes a drink, then the drink takes the man. And by the time I was 18 years old, I was beginning to be moved out of the equation of whether or not I drank. Alcohol was beginning to do for me on an automatic what I wasn't capable of doing for myself. And I have other opportunities, and it's not that other people that love me, because I had very loving people around me. I just didn't know how to receive it. And when you don't know how to receive, it's like someone who's not giving. because every time they tried to give, I rejected it based on who I thought I was, a person with no value, and I would drink because that caused me a lot of pain. It's very simple. We're not complicated. This is not a simple program for complicated people. That's BS. Whoever told you that, they'll lie about other things. It's a simple program for simple people who love to complicate things. I tell people all the time, you ask me what time it is and I just might tell you how to build a watch. That's closer to the truth. It's a simple program for simple people. And it has to be simple because guys and gals like you and I, we have to have it simple for us to understand. You know, and I love the simplicity of the program. I love how they talk about we're like the passengers of a great liner when moment after rescue from shipwreck. Every one of us knows what it's like to drown. Very few of us, those of who have recovered, know what it's like to be rescued, to be saved. That's why my sponsor says he's a happy, grateful, recovered alcoholic. That's why I introduce myself. I don't say I'm a recovered alcoholic so to impress you, although I hope some of you are. I say it because I want the newcomer to understand that the big book is a plan of recovery. That's why they wrote it. We are 100 men and women who have recovered from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. To show others how we have recovered is precisely why we wrote this book. We hope this book is so convincing that no further authentication will be necessary. That's what it says. That's how it starts. How it finishes, though, is up to you. Sometimes I'm in the rooms, and maybe you can relate to it. I'm wondering, what book are you reading? Because you're not reading the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous, you know, and that's the thing. It's a guide because people like you and me, we shouldn't suffer the way, no one should suffer the way we have suffered, and yet we suffer. So I'm 18 years old, and this is my claim to freedom. I'm 18 years old. This is how quickly I got sick. I started drinking when I was 14. I'm 18 years old, and I go into the registrar's office January 3rd of 1972. Never forget the day because it's my birthday. And I walk into the registrar's office and I told them I'm dropping out of high school. They said, you can't do that. And I said, I can do whatever I want. I'm 18 years old. That was my first, I'll show you, I'll kill me. That was my first act of independence. Of all things to gain independence on. I'm burning my life to the ground and I just wanted you to know you can't do anything about it. Remember that? I mean, we don't say that, but that's what we're doing. I'm leaving education to go pursue life. I didn't know how to live. So I dropped out of high school so I could drop out of the Air Force. That made a lot of sense. And it was interesting when I got out of the Air Force, I never made it out of basic training, and I'm not bragging. I'm actually very ashamed of this, but that's where my sickness brought me. On my discharge papers, they said a general discharge under honorable conditions, inability to adjust to military life. That was pretty nice, huh? Inability to adjust to military life. You could have said inability to adjust to life, and you would have been right. The greatest thing they ever did for me was give me a 10 milligram prescription, open-ended prescription of Valium, and sent me home. That's what you do with a real alcoholic. Now I can become a drug addict on top of that. And I will share one story about drugs out of respect for AA. I used to hang out with these people who cook meth. And people who cook meth, if no one's told you before, they're the worst people on the planet. They will steal your money and then help you look for it. I mean, they are notoriously bad. They told me, you have to leave, you smoke too much meth. Because I did everything alcoholically. I had no brakes. I was an out of control freight train running down a track going to nowhere. That's who I was. So I had to negotiate this when I first came into treatment. And I didn't come into treatment, not when I needed to, because I needed to when I was 18. I didn't come into alcohol treatment until I was 32 years old. But by 26, I was completely removed. Remember, first a man takes a drink. You remember this. And then the drink started to take a drink. When did you lose control? Like many of us, we lost control of our ability to control our drinking much longer before we came into the program. We knew. There was a friend of mine, Tom Bennett, Will knows him. He would say, it's 3 o'clock in the morning and the lights are out and nobody else is there. You know what the truth is. So we know the truth long before people, because we know what we have to do to forget who we are. And by 26 years old, I came up with a great idea. I was living in California. You'll love this idea. I'm living in California. Why not move to Las Vegas? That'll work. That'll fix everything. So I leave a place where bars close at 2 in the morning to a place where bars never close. That makes a lot of sense. And I think in my mind, I'm thinking that life will get better because I found out in Alcoholics Anonymous that these are called geographics, which is a pretty good word of running away. And so by the time I'm 26 years old, the drink began to take the drink. And AA has got phenomenal in Las Vegas. It's amazing. But one of the things that moving to Las Vegas did for me, I tell people all the time, it turned a fender bender into a full-on head-on collision. Because when my bottom hit in Las Vegas, I drank and used 6 years in Las Vegas before I would get clean and sober. In that short 6 years of time, it seemed short, it seemed long at the same time. There was no doubt in my mind. It was like cutting the elevator cords of an elevator that was on the highest floor, and the crash that resulted in my going into treatment was hard, and it felt sudden, but it wasn't sudden. It felt quick, but it took a long time because things had to get destroyed. People had to leave. I had to lose everything more than once. Like I said, I was on my second marriage, and that was failed. I'd walked out. I'm the kind of guy that moves his children out of the way so he can go drink. I'm that guy. And it's part of my story. It embarrasses me to this day, but that's who I was. That's where alcohol had taken me. That I could justify picking up my little girls and saying, you're better off without dad because dad has to go drink. Leaving a wonderful wife, walking away from everything that made sense to stay just so I could go get drunk. That's who I became. And if you'd asked me a few years earlier, I would defend how I would never be that person. I would never be my dad. I would never be that person who leaves his family, and yet you could write a book on how to leave based on how I left, how not to leave. And so by the time I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, and I tell you this because I want you to know how desperate and how beat down I was, to walk into a treatment center and to say, I can't do this anymore. And I wasn't even ready to admit that I was alcoholic. I was just ready to admit I was going to die, and if something didn't change, I was not going to live. But something happened to me. I met guys like Will, and we were talking about Buddy C. and Eddie Plummer and the men and women, primarily men, because I'm a predator. Girls, stay away from the guys, especially if you're brand new. We just stay away from the guys. It's just a good idea. And so just a personal observation. And so many of the men that I learned from along the way taught me, if you want what we have, and guys like Will, matter of fact, first time I heard Will speak, he's been saying he's been a happy, grateful, recovered alcoholic since the day I've known him. And I remember going up to him after a meeting and say, how can you be happy, grateful, and recovered all at the same time? And he said to me, he said, if you have time, get your big book, we'll sit down and I'll show you how it can be these things. And so my instruction has always been the big book, has always been, if you want to live, then you'll read what we have done. Because remember that the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is not designed to tell you what to do. It's designed to tell you what we have done. If you want what we have, and you are willing to go to any lengths to get it, then you're ready to take certain steps. Do you ever read the steps? I suppose you have, you're here in a room. If you haven't read them, read them. Every step is written in the past tense. Do you ever know that about the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous? Every step, we admitted we are powerless, came to believe, became willing, made a searching and fearless moral inventory, admitted to God. We're entirely ready to have God remove our shortcomings. Defects of character, past tense, made a list, and step 8, past tense, became willing to make amends, past tense, continued to take, past tense, sought is past tense, having had, past tense. Every step is a step written in the past tense. And it's written in the past tense not to show you or tell you what to do, it's to tell you what we have done. It's really ingenious how they put this thing together. And we used to say in Las Vegas, it works when you work it, and it won't if you don't. That's pretty simple. I know my car will start only when I push the ignition, when I push that starter button. Then I know. Otherwise, we'll sit and wonder why this car. Well, you need to push the button. And that's what we need to do with the programs of alcoholics. We have to concede to our innermost self that we were alcoholic. This is the first step in our recovery. Then we have to admit we're powerless over alcohol. So when you hear step 1, we admitted we are powerless over alcohol and our life. No, that word "and" is not there. That our life had become unmanageable. As a direct result of my drinking, my life is unmanageable. I had a friend, and Will probably knows who he is, but he used to say, not every time I drank did I get in trouble, but every time I was in trouble, I was drunk. You probably heard it before. That's absolutely true. Because there were times where I would go out and drink, and I'd actually stop at 4 and 5. I wouldn't have 8 or 9 or 10. And I would get home and I knew where my car was. But every time I didn't know where my car was, I was always hammered. Will tells a story about his on January or December 31st of 1979, the night before he would be sober forever. And he didn't even know where he was. He was supposed to be at the Rose Parade, but he ended up at his mom's house, passed out. And next day he said, how did I get here? He's watching the Rose Parade on TV and wondering how come he's not at the parade because he drank the previous night. And that's how we are. So we go through this program designed to teach us how to live. And it was very difficult at first because I wanted to gain a certain amount of independence, but I couldn't gain independence apart from you. And so I remember Texas Mike, and it was the first time I realized one day at a time. We talk about being sober forever, but we're sober forever one day at a time for the rest of our life. And I remember Texas Mike, Scott Shields, his girlfriend Melissa, and Texas Mike and I were out. And I was talking about my relapse, how devastating it was and how glad I was to be back. And maybe you can relate to this. Texas Mike looked at me in his sage capacity, and he talked in this Texas drawl, so I won't even try to do it because I wouldn't do him justice. And Mike said to me, he said, "How long were you sober before you went out?" And I said, 71 days. And he said, "How long you been sober today?" And I did the math real quick, and I said, 72. And he said, "See, I told you could do it." Do you ever talk to somebody who shouldn't know something they do know? I hate those people. And yet Mike knew the answer before he even asked the question. And I don't know how he knew the answer. But it told me that one day at a time. And it was a real turning point for me. It was when I realized that the people in the rooms, I needed to be like them. I needed to do what they did. And so, you know, where it says, fake it till you make it. There's a lot of truth in that. Because if you fake something long enough, you'll believe it. And I started acting like guys like, well, Buddy C and Eddie P and Texas Mike and Russian Ted and Abe the Plumber and Amos the Skidwell Rhino and Tom Bennett and Steve Matthews and all the other giants in my life. And I started to act like they were acting. I didn't believe it for me, but if it worked for them, maybe, just maybe, the things I saw in them could happen to a person like me. And it took a while. And then things would happen along the way. My dad died when I was 2.5 years sober. And my dad just didn't die. My dad died. I mean, I was driving from California to Las Vegas to visit my dad, spend a week with my dad. My dad had been sober for a number of years, and I got sober, and I was sober 2.5 years, and my dad had died. And I knocked on his door, and no one answered, but his car was there. So it was a little strange for me. And someone came around the corner and said, somebody just picked up, an ambulance had just picked up a man, and that's all we know. And so then my sister-in-law came around the corner and said, Bobby, Dad had a heart attack and it doesn't look good. He's at Las Vegas Hospital. And so there have been things along the way. But you know, alcohol never fixed any of those things. You know who fixed them? My sponsor in a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And I tell you that, and I don't tell that story very much, but I tell you that because we walked through some painful things. Mike right now has got a grandchild in NICU, right? Yeah. And he's at a meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's not by accident. He knows that if he wants a fellowship that he desires, God will show you how to create the fellowship you crave. So there was a craving in Mike that despite the fact that his world is upside down regarding his grandchild, he knows he can get fellowship that he craves in the meeting of Alcoholics Anonymous. I didn't tell you. I almost forgot. I'm a counselor and I'm brilliant. I want you to know that. This is how brilliant I am. This is a great story. This should be a joke, but it's not. It's really happened. So I'm a counselor for this big outfit in California. We had a place up in the foothills in Azusa, California. And did I tell you I was a very good counselor? This is very important. So I worked an overnight shift giving meds, and we're called a co-occurring disorder. So co-occurring disorder is not people with other addictions, it's people with documented psychiatric conditions and also alcoholic. So here I was, it's like 3 a.m, and I'm sitting on the porch outside. Did I tell you how brilliant you'll love this. This shows you how brilliant I am. So I'm sitting out on the porch, and this guy sits down to talk to me, one of our inmates, one of our patients there. And he's starting to, and I'm asking him these probing questions, And he's starting to reveal all about his sister and about relationships and about how his life is better. And I'm thinking, I'm really freaking good. And the more he talks, the better I feel about me. It's all about me. And all of a sudden he stands up and he says, Kevin, I think my name is Kevin. And he gets up and he walks away. Trust me, this guy's name wasn't Kevin. But he thought it was. That's how, and it's good to laugh at ourselves. It's good to, it says in the big book, outsiders are often amazed when we burst into merriment over a seemingly tragic situation, but why shouldn't we laugh? For we have recovered and been given the power to help others. And that's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous gives to us. But it gives that to us as we do the steps. As I was telling Chad earlier, steps 1, 2, 3, they are powerless steps. They're surrender steps. Steps 4 through 9 are steps to recovery. And steps 10, 11, and 12 are designed to keep us recovered. And if no one's ever told you that before, I'm telling you now. Steps 1, 2, and 3. If you're not surrendered, we can't help you. Because at some point, Will tells me, you can't do the 4th step for them. We have to surrender ourselves to God as you understood God, right? You have to surrender. I can't surrender for you. Carol can't surrender for you. Will can't surrender for you. Mike can't surrender. No one, Don can't surrender for anyone. We have to surrender ourselves. Then we can't, my sponsor Will tells me we can't do step 4 for them. We can do step 5 with them, but we can't do step 4 for them. The guidance is in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we have to admit we're powerless over alcohol, that our life had become unmanageable. Do you know the insanity of my addiction doesn't rear its ugly head until I'm sober? Think about that for a moment. The insanity of my addiction does not appear until I'm sober. There was a person the other day at a meeting. They had said they had a craving for alcohol. They had a craving. So I went to this person after the meeting and I said, how long have you been sober? And they said 2 weeks or 3 weeks. And I said, you're not experiencing a craving, you're experiencing a mental obsession. Because a craving only occurs when we're drinking. The mental obsession is what keeps us from drinking, overcoming that mental obsession. That's why it says we recover from a seemingly hopeless state of mind and body. And coming to believe that a power greater than yourself can restore you to sanity. It says in step 10, for by this time sanity will have returned. So my message to you tonight is to keep coming back. No matter if you drink or don't drink, just come back. Let us love you. Because that's what worked for me. Let us love you in a way that you can tell us anything. And we'll tell you, boy, you really need to come back. Some of you more than others. And I say that because I was the other. I was the guy who'd burnt every bridge down. Anyone who knew me, and you can relate to this for sure, everyone who knew you asked you, it's probably better off if you don't come. Do you remember that feeling of finding out about a party after the fact? Oh, so-and-so had a birthday? Well, I was in jail, but they had a birthday party. You don't get invited to anniversaries. They just stop inviting you because they know how we're going to show up. And they don't want to babysit us. If you haven't experienced that, we'll call that a yet. Because there's certain things that haven't happened to me, but they're yets. And one yet that's never occurred in my life, and I said I'll promise I'll stop after this. Going into jails and institutions, I have never killed the Jones family of 5. And you know what? I've never met the Jones family of 5. But I've never woken up in a jail cell finding out I killed the family and I never remember driving. Do you ever know anyone like that? I've met them.
Yeah.
I've met them along the way. Could you picture this for a moment? Not even remembering that you drove to find out you've killed a family. That's the hideousness of our treatable disease, because it is treatable. You know, Bob Darrell, who I don't personally like, I've never said this on tape, but Bob knows I don't like him, so it's okay. Tragically, Bob's mom died of cancer, and she was in hospice, and Bob tells a great story. I listen to Bob. I don't like him, but I listen to him on a regular basis, so I said that on tape as well. If you went to a hospice care right now, and you told them, if you do this, you could live and die of natural causes, there'd be a line around the building. We suffer from a disease of denial. It is one of the only diseases known to man that will tell you you don't have it. Once we break free of the denial, we begin to be sweetly reasonable. So come back for the fellowship. Let the fellowship keep you long enough so the roots of recovery can take root. And once those roots, I guarantee you, once the roots of recovery take place and you begin to see your life change, you will want more and more and more. My middle name is More. It really is. I just changed what the more is. And if you change what the more is as well, you can have what we have. Thank you for letting me share. My name is Robert.